LiQWYD here and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking you through how I made my crop top and arm sleeves. I don't know what they're called. Talking you through how I made them basically. This is not going to be a tutorial, so if you're looking for a tutorial on how to make them, I'm afraid I can't help you with that because I sort of made this up as I went along. So use this video for tips and maybe some insight and some help into how to make your own, but in terms of a step-by-step tutorial, that's not what this video is. As I was sewing these and putting these together, I basically filmed the process and talked about any mistakes I'd made or any sort of ideas I had. That's more what this video is. It's a work log and it's showing my process rather than step by step. There you go. Here's how you do it. The first video that you've probably seen is about making the shoes and the crowns. Obviously I'm not wearing them in the video because there's no point, but please go and check those out if you haven't already, because I'm not kidding, I think the shoes are actually my favourite part so far that I've made, and here I am wearing this, but I think the shoes are the best part. There will be two other videos in this series, one for making the bolero and the shorts. I don't know which way they're going to go around yet because I don't know which one I'm going to make first, but we'll find out. Anyway, enough of my blabbering, let's get on with the video. I'm starting Cleves' crop top today, so I've got my black lining fabric, I've got my red backing fabric which is for the sequin pieces. I'm going to sew all of this together first, and then I'm going to see if I can pin the stripy black fabric over the top in one piece, just so I can avoid seams on that fabric. But if that doesn't work, I'm going to unpick it and then have to cut the pattern pieces of the crop top out of the striped fabric and try and match up the stripes, if that makes any sense, but I guess we'll see what happens. The first thing to do is to baste my sequin pieces onto the red. I did cut these pieces larger than what they needed to be just because this is actually impossible to cut straight because it's stretchy and annoying. So I can't wait to get my loads of red sequins just on my table. You can already see they're escaping already. So this is going to be fun. Not. It's pretty late in the evening now and I've completely forgot to film it, but I basted the sequin part of the fabric onto the red underlining. So I did that for each piece. You can see here I've just basted all of them together and then pinned the pieces up and sewed them properly. So I basically have a pretty basic looking crop top thing. I was really concerned about sewing with sequin fabric because I've never sewn with it before, but it actually wasn't too bad. I just sewed really slowly and just paid attention and nothing went wrong, thankfully. So I am now going to remove some of my basting stitches and trim the seams, and I'm going to sew up the lining pieces. Now these are exactly the same. So we have a back piece here, we have a side back piece, the side piece here, so this is obviously where the bust is, and then we have one whole front piece here. So it's pretty simple, and the original pattern is by Dove Designs and I bought this on Etsy, and I basically just have shortened the pattern and also extended the back and side piece a little bit because my measurements didn't match up exactly, so I just kind of modified it to fit me. There is one thing to note though with this pattern, it does overlap quite a lot at the back, so I think when it comes to me adding the fastenings and stuff, I'm just going to have it overlap quite a bit, but I was having a lot of stress with the mock-up for this. I'd completely had enough, so I thought instead of causing myself loads of stress, we're just going to make it big at the back, and then you can sew in your snaps and hook and eyes wherever you want, and no one's going to see the back of your top because you'll have a jacket over it or you'll be facing forwards, so it doesn't matter. I didn't film me doing this just because it was, again, really stressful. I tried to get the stripes as perfect as I could. I don't think they are perfectly perfect, but at this point I don't know what it is. Normally I love cosplaying, obviously it's like my big hobby, duh, but right now I'm just not feeling it. I was going to like add the straps like here, so like pin them in place here and then sew the lining on, so then the straps are just in between the lining and the main outside fabric. That would look the neatest anyway, but because I don't know the positioning of where this is going to sit on me yet, I think I am going to sew up the top with the lining just without the straps, and then work out the belt piece with the leather, sew that on, make the top first and then do the straps last and just kind of tack them in place. because obviously I have to add the studded trim around the top and bottom. So I think if I put the straps on before I do the trim, I can hide the stitching seams of the straps with the trim. If that makes any sense whatsoever, I don't know. But yeah, it's on and it'll have to do. So as you were just watching there, I sewed up the lining onto the inside of the I was going to call it the jacket then, it's not a jacket. So yeah, right sides together, sew up the side seams and the top. And there we go. I have a pretty much lined crop top now. Normally, you know, you would top stitch all of this, but because I am sewing on the trim here afterwards, that's technically going to act as a top stitch, so I'm not going to bother. The next thing for me to do is to now make the leather strip that goes along the bottom here. This is going to take forever, but I've measured this out like 5 times to try and get this the same, and each time it changes length, so I don't know. But yeah, I'm gonna basically cut a leather piece that has the design on it, and then I'm gonna add 1.6 on either end because that is how wide my trim is going to be, and then add the seam allowance on top of that. Basically, yeah, it's pretty much done. No, it's not. Why did I say that? Ignore the raw bottom edge. But yeah, it's lined and the stripes look pretty good. Now I'm starting on the little red leather strip. Basically, this is a faux leather. I struggled for ages to try and find one I liked because it's actually impossible to find a red faux leather with the squares on it. And I could have gone to Goldhawk Road and looked for the fabric, but it would have been impossible for me to go to London and back and have a huge roll. Because that's basically what it is. It's a huge roll. And it's just impossible. So I found this, which I actually kind of like. The squares are actually too small. So Cleves' actual costume, it's like a square of this is made by 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas I am going with 3. So you can see here 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So basically I worked out that this piece needs to be 84.5 centimeters to fit my crop top. And I was going to try and measure it, but because I don't quite know what I'm doing my pattern yet, this is what I'm going to do. So I think I'm going to do my squares like this and then my trim like this, but I think I might actually line up the trim now to the edge of the squares instead of have the red gap. I think it just might look a bit too big if I do that. So yeah, I think that's my plan. So instead of me trying to work out the pattern now, I'm just going to cut out loads of the squares now and then just see what happens, I guess. Yeah, I think I'm just going to cut the squares up all the way to like the seam allowance, when I decide where the seam allowance is, so that when I sew it up, I think the pattern will go all the way around and it won't just stop and then there'll be like a block of red and then the end of the garment or whatever. So I've got my safety glasses because I am using a craft knife. Because it's quite small, I don't trust that it's going to stay in one piece. I have a huge fear that it's going to snap and the sharp bit's going to fly off into my eye. So I'm going to wear these, and I actually think it's probably a good idea to wear them in general for stuff like this. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my craft mat out, my brand new craft mat, and just cut out all of these. And it's going to take forever probably, but we like tedious work. It means I don't have to focus. Cut out a line of squares, and I've now marked on the back how big I need to be. So it turned out that my number of squares was absolutely perfect for how long I need it. So I need the finished strip to be 84.5 centimeters, so that's this part here. I've then added 1.7 up from each square, if that makes sense, and down. That's for the trim. My trim is 1.6 centimeters, so I gave myself an extra millimeter just in case. I know it's not much, but there we go. So that's this part here, and then I've now added the 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to cut this all out. So I've glued it onto the PVC fabric. This was actually, it turned out that the fabric sample they sent me for this black fabric before I bought it turned out to be long enough for me to put my actual fabric on, so, you know, reusing and all that. I've just put a little bit of E6000. I didn't use the spray glue in the end because it was raining and I couldn't be bothered to, you know, deal with spraying it outside. So I just used some E6000 just to hold it in place. And now I'm gonna sew along all of this. So I did a little test piece. I have switched out my needle to a leather needle. And I tried a couple of different stitch lengths. I am going to go with this one. It is a bit smaller, but I still think it looks okay. And I've managed to sew everything on. So yeah, I'm going to switch out my thread to red and get on with it. Oh god, I'm so scared.
So I thought I needed. So I thought I needed.
So that was incredibly painful, but it's now done. They have lined up a little bit wonky in places, but that doesn't matter because these are going to be going like in the middle in the corners here, so I'm not too worried about that. I will say it's very difficult because a lot of people say when you sew with leather or faux leather or whatever to use the longest stitch length on your machine. Now, because I'm sewing such tiny things, it's very hard to not go too far. So you can see on this stitch I've ended up having to follow that line instead of this line. Yeah, in places some of the stitching does look a little bit dodgy, but unless you're up this close to my costume, like that one, that's awful, you are not going to notice. You aren't going to notice at all that the stitching is a little bit dodgy. I would have, like, stuck these down instead of sewed them, but you can kind of see that the backing on this is felt, so it pokes out. And I just felt, if I just stuck it, it would look horrendous. So at least having sewn it, then it's done. So now I'm gonna like go through and see if I can cut away any last little bits of felt remaining, but if not, there's not really a lot I could do. I don't know if I've got a red Sharpie I could colour it in, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, the next thing is to add all of these. Okay, I've added all of the metal studs in between the squares, and it's definitely evened them up and made them look a little bit better. Some of them look still a little bit wonky, but can't really help that. So there you go, that's what it is. And I'm just kind of thinking, now I've done that, I can cut it out into the actual strip shape that I need. But because I've cut it wonky, I have no idea what to do. So I think I'm going to change up my plan and make the stud trim to go on the top and bottom of it. I was going to make the whole strip completely, sew it onto the top and then attach the trim last, but I'm thinking now it allows me to basically add the trim now while it's flat. So we've got it there. It's really hard to do this one-handed. So instead it allows me to add the trim first, and then from this top edge of the trim I can work out my seam allowance that way. So I think that's what I'm going to do instead. So yeah, I didn't film myself adding the tiny little studs because they're so small, my camera probably wouldn't have been able to focus and work it out. But basically I have to do the same thing with this trim. I have 9mm studs here and 1.6mm ribbon. Oh boy, this is going to take me forever. I can't wait to do this for the whole costume. This is going to be so fun. Anyway, yeah, that's basically what it is. It's just adding studs to the ribbon. This is what they look like. They're just sharp and pointy, so you can stab them through and then bend them over. Now this really hurts, and I know that there are tools you can get to do this easier and quicker,
but they're like £50 and stuff, and I've already spent a lot of money on all of my fabrics and supplies for this costume, so I'm gonna have to do it by hand. And I figured out the best way, instead of trying to bend them all by my fingers and, you know, causing blood, sweat and tears, I figured out if I stab this through the ribbon and then I just bend them over on the table, so like I hold it and press it down over the table, saves my fingers a whole lot of pain. The trim is on and I've now put into place the lining. I was going to sew on the machine, but I have to basically sew as close as I can to this edge so there's no red showing, and I don't want to hit the studs with my needle, so I think hand sewing is going to be the best for accuracy. And I was wondering, oh, how can I mark out which line to sew along, but obviously it turns out that when I sewed the trim on, I sewed as close as I could to the edge, so I'm just going to follow the stitching line for that, and I'm just going to hand stitch it together. So I'm basically going to go sew this edge, this long edge, and then this one, turn it right side out, and then it can be attached onto the main top. So I've pinned the strip onto the body piece. It pretty much lines up on this side, like it's pretty much perfect, but on this side the body piece is actually just a little bit longer than this. Despite me measuring it about 15 times, I don't quite know how that's happened, but it doesn't matter, because I'm thinking when this is done, because this has to do up like with an overlap, I'm going to have this piece on the bottom and then this piece goes on the top like that, and you won't even know. So yeah, that's my plan. But I am pretty happy with how this is looking so far. I really thought it was going to turn out horrendous, but it's actually worked. So don't doubt yourself, kids. I don't know how much more I'm going to film of this because it's just going to be a load of hand sewing and you're not going to really see what I'm doing. But I'm going to basically do another back stitch to sew this up along this edge, and then I'm going to do a ladder / invisible stitch on the lining, so you can see here that I've ironed it already, and that will join up like that. So I've just sewn in some snaps here. Ignore how wonky that one is. I know, it doesn't matter, no one will see it. So I've added some snaps here, and obviously the corresponding ones on this side, and also a hook and eye just on the little leather strip, just to hold it in place. I might need to redo it because it likes to like tilt itself, especially this one. It just does that, which is not helpful. I have started on the straps. Now, I basically worked out my pattern for this by cutting out strips of whatever this is, like my mock-up fabric is a basic cotton, to the width that I wanted, and then just kept pinning them on myself, and not actually pinning them on myself, but you know, pinning it on the top, and kept trying it on so that I could work out how it fits. So I have 2 strips that go from here all the way back, and then 2 strips that crisscross like this. So I bought a roll of this kind of stuff. It's basically a red mirror vinyl. Now I did want a holographic because that is what the queens have. They have a holographic vinyl, but it's impossible to find it in red, and it's impossible to find a lot of it. So I managed to get a small roll that I think is used for like making a handbag and stuff. But you can see here, I don't know how well it's going to reflect. It's probably better. Hang on. Let's try it with this because it might. Oh, that's bright. You can kind of see the rainbow effect going on here. So it's kind of holographic. It's more mirrory. So you can see it's going very orange and stuff there. That's more mirrory and reflective. But it does have the odd bit of holographic in. So I don't hate it. And it's the closest I can find. And yeah, it's pretty nice. So I went with this. So I've basically cut 2 strips for the longer ones that go like that, and then 2 smaller ones that go across like that. Ow, that was my elbow on the table. So I'm going to basically cut some lining pieces out of the black lining, sew this up just along either side, and hopefully be able to turn them inside out. I'm really hoping I can do that. And
And then I'm just going to make loads of trim again and stick loads of trim on.
I have some finished straps. They look a little bit rough on the ends, but we'll just ignore that. Because I did basically, first time around, I did sew them inside out and try and turn them round, but because the vinyl is so stiff, can't do that. So I basically recut them out, but folded the edges inside and put them wrong sides together, and then did a really rough ladder stitch just to hold it in place, because obviously you can't use pins. And then yeah, I just basically sewed around the top edge, so they now look pretty smooth. I'm not so bothered about the bottom parts because you won't see them, so it doesn't really matter. But and again, you won't see like this, so it doesn't really matter because that's the bit that goes on my body. So yeah, there we go. I have these two are the shoulder straps, and then these two are the crisscrossy ones. So these are on. I can't feel my hands. They're very numb from all the hand sewing and the making of the trim, but they're on, they're stitched down. So yeah, it's pretty much done. Now all I have to do is make the load of trim to go around here, and hopefully I can sew it on my machine, because the reason I couldn't sew this trim on this by machine is because the foot, the machine foot, would stick to this, and I use like a special thin foot to be able to sew along the edge and not get stuck on the studs. So that explains that. So hopefully I can sew the rest of it by my machine and it'll be so much quicker, but I have to make all the trim now. I'm happy with it. I like how it looks, but I do think it feels tight, but I think that's because all of the fabric I've used is not stretchy except this mesh, the striped mesh, and obviously that's not going to stretch because, you know, it's not like the main part of the garment. So yeah, it doesn't move, but I can move in it perfectly fine. But it does feel like I can't take a full breath in, but I can, but I can't. It might work better if I hold it like this. So yeah, you can see, there it is. It doesn't look horrendous. It looks pretty even too, I'd say. It's not perfect, but they can be moved around to sit straight, so yeah, there you go. Done-ish. Almost. Yes, I am in my 6th shirt because in about 20 minutes I'm leaving my house to go to London because yes, I am seeing 6 today. I'm very excited. I really, really need it right now. Yeah, so I'm really excited. Anyway, Cleves, I am basically really shoddily hand sewing the trim on because for some reason, I don't know whether it's me, probably is because there's nothing up here right now. My machine is just not working and I can't think what foot it is that I use. The really thin foot that I use to sew the trim on to the leather is just not working. And yeah, either it is me because there's nothing up here in my head, or I think it might be the fact that of the mesh and the sequin fabric. I don't know whether it likes sewing them, if that makes any sense. Like I'm sewing quite close to the edge and because it's stretchy, I don't think it likes it. So again, I'm doing the most shoddy running stitch I think I've ever done in my life, but it's black thread on black ribbon. You can't really see it, not unless, well, even then the camera won't focus, but you really can't tell, I don't think. So yeah, I just got really angry with my machine last night. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna be petty and hand sew it. Once that's done, the crop top is done, and I think it's fitting that I'm finishing it the day that I'm seeing the show. Obviously they have updated the West End costume now, and I do love that version a lot, but I know that my sanity, I could not make that, so I'm making an earlier version, hence this. So yeah, let's go and see 6. I cannot wait. I literally cannot wait. I've seen the tour, I've seen the bootleg many times. I haven't actually had a chance to go to the West End to see it yet.
crop top is done, and yeah, it fits perfectly. It's on, it fits. I think the back looks a little bit strange. It's not my favourite thing about it, but the jacket will be over it, and I'm not really going to pose for photos like this, am I? So no one's really going to see it. I don't really care. As long as the front looks good and the sides, which they do. I was really worried that the trim was going to look really weird sewn on by hand, but you can't tell. I thought it was going to go like really wobbly and horrible. I'm really happy with it actually. I really struggled at the beginning to try and get this to work. And that doesn't bode well for me because this is the easy part of the costume. I have to do the arm thingies next, and they'll probably be easy. But the shorts and over jacket bolero thing, I don't think I'm gonna find them very easy to do, but I guess we will see. Also, I hope you liked the clip of the Mega 6. They were brilliant yesterday, absolutely amazing. The casts were incredible. We had 3 swings on, I believe. They were insane. Everyone was just amazing, and I may or may not be booking a singular ticket to go back and see it again in a couple of weeks. Maybe, maybe not. I am kind of sad that I'm not making the newer version of the Cleves costume, but I know with my skill set and my patience, I couldn't do it. And to me, there is no point in making the reveal underneath because it's a cosplay. I'm not going to be performing or anything. It doesn't make sense for me to do that. So I'm going with an earlier version of the costume. Hence why this is a thing. Hello. Okay, so we are starting on the arm sock thingies. Whatever they are. The little arm thingies. They basically look very similar to the crop top from what I can see. They are red sequin, black striped mesh over the top, and then the inside part is like a stretchy black mesh material. So to work out my pattern piece, I literally measured around my wrist and measured around where I wanted the top of it to come up, so just here and then like here-ish, and then measured the length between them, and then I basically just halved the wrist and arm measurements so that I could mark them on a straight line. So I marked each half this way and that way and joined them up, and we get like this little shape. Basically just did the same as a crop top. I have my red sequin fabric and the red backing fabric. I'm not going to bother with any black lining fabric or anything just because these are going to be against my arms. You're not going to see. But I did stick with the red lining because obviously the sequin fabric is quite thin, and also the back of it is really itchy and irritating, and because it's going to be on my bare arms, it will just end up becoming insufferable if I don't do that. So that's one layer. I have 2 cut out of the black striped mesh once again, and also I have just my plain black mesh for the inside. Now this is stretchy, and yeah, I'll hopefully be able to get my arm in here. So I'm literally just going to take this, pin this on, baste them together, and then sew them up either side with this, so we just end up sandwiching them like that. So I've started sewing this together. I've basically decided I'm doing a French seam. Now if you don't know what a French seam is, it basically is like a finished seam inside of a finished seam. If that makes any sense at all. So you can see here that it's basically finished on the inside. So when I turn it out over to the outside, we have our seam where it's sewn it together, and then this can be pressed and tucked in. So that didn't work. This is completely split like it would if you were wearing a pair of tights, and that is quite baffling to me because I didn't think that was meant to happen. So back to the drawing board, I guess. Perhaps this is just slightly too tight, but it fits fine. So I don't quite know what I'm gonna do, but it's a good job I only made one and it's not completely finished, so that's okay. Back to the drawing board. I've wasted a bunch of fabric. So it's been a couple of days. I did try and make a second arm sleeve using the original mesh, but it just wasn't having it. The other one laddered too. I thought this was a 4-way stretch, but when you look at it, that's not stretching really. So I think I ended up getting the wrong mesh. So I just hopped onto eBay and got a different kind of mesh. And already just by the feel of this, I can tell this is going to be better. And this is a 4-way stretch mesh, and I believe it's called a power mesh. At least that's what they called it. But you can see there, it stretches in all the directions. I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but you can kind of see the holes are a lot bigger on this one. If I get this original mesh here, yeah, you can kind of see the difference, or at least I can anyway. The camera probably won't pick it up. So I'm basically going to try and make another couple of pairs out of this new mesh, and we'll see what happens. I really hope this goes well, but I think this one will work better. So, it is, well, it's not done, but this one seems to be better, this mesh. So I think now I'm going to attempt to hem it. I don't know quite, I think I might use a zigzag stitch when I hem it because they're meant better for stretch and knit fabrics, which is what this is, and obviously when I hem it, it's going to be harder to get on. You're probably sick of this camera angle, but I just can't be bothered to use my makeshift weird tripod. It's just easier to sit on my desk. I've hemmed them, kind of. I've hemmed this part because this is not stretchy fabric like the striped mesh is, but it's sewn down onto fabric that doesn't stretch. So none of this section stretches at all. So it needs to be hemmed properly so that it doesn't come unstitched and fray and all that. Now, I haven't hemmed the net side, the mesh side, whatever you want to call it, yet. I thought I'd try, but because this needs to stay stretchy for me to actually get it on, because obviously you can see here my wrist is quite thin and, you know, I have to get my hand through this. It won't work if I hem it, no matter what, you know, even if I hem it with like some kind of stretchy stitch, you know, it just wasn't having it. So yeah, I'm thinking I'm just going to leave it as a raw edge because it doesn't seem to be ripping and it doesn't fray. So I think I'm going to get away with it. I sewed it on and I hate it. I really don't like it. As soon as I like bend my arm, like it just sags. And obviously because I've loosely hand stitched it on, look how wobbly it is. I don't like it. I'm not vibing with it. I do actually think I might leave this just how this is, just have no trim here, because it just looks neater to me than that. That just doesn't look neat at all, or good. This just looks better. So I think my plan of action is to remove this trim and actually add a little bit to the top and bottom, I think. I want to see how that looks. I'm not going to go all the way around to the net side because obviously it still needs to stretch, and if I sew something on it's not going to stretch. So I think I'm just going to put a little bit of trim on here and then along this part here and see what that looks like. I might add elastic, but also...
So I've removed the trim. I've already lost a stud, but I think I'm going to like chop this up and reuse it on this one. It saves me having to make more. And I've also used a whip stitch on this seam. So I've turned it inside out. I can't, well, whatever. You can see here, there's the netting. And I've taken this French seam and I've just folded it in. And then I've done a very rough, very rubbish whip stitch, just sewing it to this red lining, and I didn't go all the way through to, you know, the red sequin layer and the striped layer. I just went through the red lining, so you hopefully won't see the stitches, but again, they're really rough and it's probably very hard to pick out, but otherwise this is obviously going to flip out onto the net side, which we don't want. So I'm going to do whip stitch down this side, And then I am going to cut this down and sew this back on.
There we go. The arm thing is done, the crop top's done. I didn't add elastic in the end, but I can always go back and add it in afterwards if I'm really not sure. But at the moment, yeah, there we go. This part of the costume is done. I'm happy with it. I surprised myself because I didn't think I'd be able to do like this part. Stay tuned for the rest of the videos when I make the bolero and short. I'll probably do them as separate videos because there's probably quite a lot that goes into those. But I wouldn't know because I haven't got anywhere with that yet. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the videos when they come out.